Hello and welcome to another discussion of Traitors Not by Janny Wurts. This is the 7th book in the Wars of Light and Shadow series, and we are reading these books approximately 150 or so pages every 2 weeks. The discussions are open to anybody who's interested. If you'd like to join us either here or talk to us about the books on the forum, consider checking out the Page Chewing forum. With me, I have the usual group of friends. Jared, could you start us off with introductions?
Yes, I'm Jared. I run the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel where we talk a lot about epic fantasy, and this is some of the most epic fantasy there is in the world. And I'm also on Speculative Speculations podcast on pagechewing.com. And Matt.
Hi guys, I'm Matt, also known as Miggins. I run the Hobbit Hole Books Twitter page and review over at Fantasy Book Critic, and come hang out with these guys and talk about the wonderful Janny's amazing epic fantasy books.
And Chibi-Po.
Hi, I'm Chibi-Po, and I don't run anything in particular. I just make playlists on YouTube and hang out on Page Chewing, and come every 2 weeks to discuss with these guys.
Nice. And chapter 5 was the Fiend battle, right? No,
Not yet.
Not quite. No.
Not yet.
Spoiler.
I just read that yesterday. I don't want to talk about it.
Chapter 5 starts off with Asandir into space.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
I was wondering about that because that
Oh my god!
he goes on a space journey, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
And he's trying to delay the Wraith incursion further out there, but I was trying to picture it. I was trying to picture what he was like looking like in space, or what he was actually doing, and it's kind of
was
what
my impression is. He's like spirit walking, so he's left his body behind.
Yeah.
And then he goes out there and I think he tries to, because before that, but he mentions that there wasn't anyone else to really pull for it because Luhane was busy working on the Sorcerer's Preserve, where the Cadrim are locked up. So the fire-breathing drakes from way back when. He talks about how if they weren't discorporate, it takes them like 5 weeks to do it, but Luhane has to take even longer because he doesn't have a body. And so let's just be like super dangerous because it talks about guarding his own shielded presence and expose him to far greater danger. So Traith wouldn't be able to help, so he takes off on his own, and then he does something with a nearby sun or a star or something.
Yeah, that part really confused me because I had to message Janny about it, and I was like, "What's going on here? Can you please explain this to me?" Because I was just like, "This is just so wild."
He helped cast the original spell that they used to try to call Caradmon back, which is what they're following, or what the race are following, the traces of that. So he was trying to hide it and divert them away, somehow.
Yeah. It was definitely a diversion tactic, a delaying tactic to try to stop further incursion, and it was wild. I was just like, wow, this is the section that's kind of going beyond the confines of the continent that we've normally been associated with, and we're now getting in this bigger picture. And it was pretty cool for me because I had just read the short story Sundering Star.
Yes.
And and I was just like, oh, okay, this short story makes so much more sense right now. And so does this section in the book, because it gives you that big picture space, how it ties into like the whole universe, really, and so it was pretty cool.
Didn't it just blow your mind?
Oh yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, it's really interesting reading that as well. Sorry to go off on a tangent, but I was reading that book, that short story. I think it was just before Sulfin gets the Beadar knife. So when all that happened, I was like, oh, yeah, because you kind of get more of that understanding, which is why you should read the short stories, because
Yeah.
they give you a little context.
A little context, yeah.
Which is cool.
But the danger of him doing that was that he could possibly be he could lose himself in corporeal form, just like some of the other guys.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was definitely a that sense of danger when he
Plus, if they
when he was doing that.
if the race had noticed him, then they could have gone after him, to try to possess his.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really interested to learn in the future, because obviously we said that he's sort of he's outside his body, it's his spirit that he's sort of sending there rather than his physical body. How that works with the interaction between the spiritual realm, his spirit traveling to a physical place, the mechanics of that's something that will be really interesting when we find out how exactly that sort of works. I guess we'll have to Rayfo.
Yep.
Am I sensing?
Creeper was about to tell us and then stopped himself. So maybe
I'm not going to tell you anything. I have been warned off. I've gotten a couple times. I've given too much away, so I'm gonna be good.
Yeah. Can you guys help me understand the part with the Ats adept? I mean, I think I kind of got it, but there was still some. So, is this what happened? He was in danger of losing his body, and the Ats adept was somehow pouring her own life force into Asandir, and he saw that happening and then came back to stop it. But okay, I remember the part I didn't quite get. He said that it triggered his the binding of the Drake.
Yes.
What does that mean? Like, is it and like what? Yeah, I guess what is the binding of the Drake? Is that the need to kill someone? Is it a compulsion to do something? And what was said compulsion? I guess
the binding of the Drakes, the Pravian or the when the seven were summoned and they're bound by the Drakes to preserve Pravian survival, and by association to the higher mysteries, the great mystery and whatnot, at all costs. And what the Ass Adept was doing would have diminished that mystery, which would have invoked the Drake's binding, because that's something that they're charged to prevent at all costs.
So even a slight diminishment, like I thought you're supposed to preserve it, but some of it you could chip away at it a little bit and still preserve it, or is there no reinforcement that could happen if, say, the Arts Adept, whatever she was doing, whatever that took away?
With the way I understand the Adepts, and they're almost like a direct line to the higher mysteries. So even one of them doing that would have, been an active diminishment. So it's like when you look at, how the state of the world in Etheria and whatnot, I think they've got some leeway within it, but I think there's a hard limit there, and what the Adept was doing would have hit that limit, is my understanding.
But the adepts, they can die, right? Like they have a finite life. Or they just live their days out in the hostel, don't they?
Magic 8 Ball says, answer unclear. Keep reading.
Okay, I was just wondering, like, if one of them died, like, then that would like diminish the Pravian mystery, I guess, right?
Yeah, I got the sense that she was putting her life in danger somehow.
Yes.
And so they can die, but maybe not of old age.
Answer is unclear.
Yeah, he was worried about misstepping out so far out in the void because the Ath Adept couldn't extend her power to save him. And she was kind of a kind of a conduit for him to get back to his body because he could sense her echo of peace while she was next to his body. And so he was relying on her for that part of it. I'm not sure. I don't remember how she was in danger herself by being that that bastion of peace for him to return to.
Oh, I think I don't remember that bit, but I think what she was also doing was Asandir's life force was receding, from what I understand. Like he was about to he was
Correct.
very close to being separated from his physical body, like becoming discorporeal, and she was doing something to prevent that, and that was what was putting her in danger.
Right. He had overstretched, and she was diminishing herself, or planning to diminish herself to make sure that he survived, and his physical body survived.
Ah, yes. Okay.
But this is something really interesting, a theme that I've picked up on in the series, and I'm sure you guys will too, is this sense of individuality and the paramount importance of that, and the importance of each and every person in the kind of whole aspect of creation. This whole idea that, losing their sense of self is like one of the worst things that could happen, right? Like one of the sorcerers is often happening that, oh, they're in danger of like losing their identity, and that core part of the self and the free will and the individuality is a really important aspect of it as well. And that's something that I'm finding really, really interesting because I've not quite had it to that extent in other series, and I really like exploring that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting about this series. I A lot of books, I guess, or just in terms of speaking of war, it's easy to reduce it to statistics and the number of people dead versus like or talking about winning or losing. But here, at the extent they go to save individuals or protect specific people, and it's not all always, except for Arathon. I think the people that they choose to put everything behind to protect aren't super important or significant or like or even helpful to their overall, I guess, motivations. So that makes it very interesting. um and also, I guess, as commentary on treating people as individuals, like you just said. I think yeah, that is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's here he mentions, Aetheria's mysteries could not sustain the loss if the grace she embodied within breathing flesh should be dimmed to a less than exalted expression. So, with the Paravians off wherever, the adepts basically stand in place of them.
Yeah.
And so he's like, no, you cannot do that.
And is the Drake binding a compulsion? Do they have the ability to make decisions within the scope of that binding? Or did he have, like, whatever he meant by triggered the Drake binding? Like, was it something that he saw that this was within the scope, analyzed it, and then decided to come back? He did say he had a brief moment of temptation where he wanted to take what she was giving him. So I got the sense that he decided to come back, and like, even within the scope of the binding, maybe they have some choice. It's not a complete compulsion.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. Because then when he did come back, Sethvia told him, "You made the right choice." So I think you're right there.
Would I be right in saying that, like, to an extent, the Fellowship still have free will despite these bindings? Chibi, is that correct?
As they've outlined themselves, like Asundir outlined, to the fishermen and Grand Conspiracy, there's some leeway, and I don't know what the hard rule is, but up to a point. And then if the actual mysteries and Peruvian survival becomes threatened, and then that would invoke the Drake's binding, and lots of people would die.
Interesting.
Yeah, because Sunday mentioned, if Peruvian survival becomes threatened, they would be forced to enact the slaughter of humanity.
Right. That's what they're trying.
It wouldn't be as like an accident. It would be in full cognizance of what they were doing.
Yeah. So it seems like all their actions are trying to avoid that eventuality of having to do such a cataclysmic thing.
Trying to thread the needle.
Yeah, that they don't want to do. That's interesting. They also mentioned in that chapter that about they mentioned once again the Urdain's library and how some knowledge is being extracted from that. And he mentioned a specific book called the Gray Book of Olve. And I was like, oh, what's that? I got to find out what that is. Have we heard about that book before?
I don't believe so, but Seth also mentions the whole pile of scrolls on the known genealogies as well.
Yes, yeah. I was going to mention that next. They unearthed the whole pile of scrolls on the known genealogies, which of course I have an odd feeling that in the wrong hands, somebody's going to try to study those and do something nefarious. I was noted that because I'm like, oh, that's going to come up later. I know it's going to come up later.
Well, we noticed. Think about one thing with the genealogies. We know that mage talents and whatnot do seem to follow along bloodlines.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got you can track genealogies, you can potentially find talented people who may not know that they have talents.
Right.
Now, who could make use of that?
Well, in the next section, Lysair is actually recruiting new talents
immediately.
So that was interesting as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Very cool.
So, another thing about this section that I wanted to discuss, I'm going to read this paragraph and then I want to talk about what that means. I forget where this is. Is it, maybe two people will remember once I finish reading. But the law of the major balance was a stricture based on permission, not a limitation based upon force. Its restraint was enacted by choice of free will without imposing fixed bonds or control. Its wisdom sprang out of living awareness, not a rote rule or formulation. True order was not subject to knowledge, but arose from the deepened awareness that sprang from coexistence in unified consciousness. Used without due care for consent, the rarefied power the sorcerer wove could be turned to harmful intent. A pattern of creation in symmetrical balance must also encompass the means to warp and imprison and destroy. I think this is when Asandir is setting up the ward or like fixing the ward again. But so I think what was interesting to me in this was that when you set up things for creation, you also have to inherently set up things that allow its destruction by the law of major balance. I'm trying to think if we saw other instances of this elsewhere in the series. Um, like, I know we're getting an explanation for this now, but I'm curious if we saw instances that we didn't notice that also included points of destruction within the woven spell.
Yeah, is it the only thing I can think of is some of the spells that the Coriani
Mm.
crafted. I don't know if they were purposely
Their
placing in
spells, their
cons-
methodology doesn't base off the law of the major balance.
doesn't okay, it doesn't base off the
Yeah,
law of
'cause
major
it's a
balance.
forced domination.
Break
Right.
things.
Yeah.
But the
Right. I just didn't know if they were
a good
breaking things.
example would be the going back to that in Grand Conspiracy, the scene when he takes the boat because he's going to stop them from setting fire to Caithwood,
Hmm.
and you get the whole bit how he manipulates the air and the water to um, uh, speed the boat along. And he remarks about how with the energy he used to do that could easily be turned and unleash like ridiculous levels of destruction, but his finesse was such that he doesn't even disturb a single fish with how it the water is moving and everything. So yeah, it's like the potential has to be there based on this, but yeah, I'd have to.
Yeah, doesn't he also have to when he did the thing with the trees, wasn't there also a drawback to that too?
Let's see what they do with the thing with the trees. He communes with the big tree, or finds the tree that's the heart of the forest, and then when makes a deal with it so that the trees are all awakened. So when
Right.
they're the people come in, try to and start setting fire to their torches to begin firing fire arrows and whatnot, just everybody drops.
Yeah, right. That's yeah.
The part about the misuse, is it that people can misuse it because the destructive element is woven in, or is it that if they don't abide by the major law, the law of major balance, that if they don't seek permission and so on, then it could be misused? I guess it could go either way, but I'm not like I have to read that paragraph more carefully to figure out which it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I think we'd probably have to look back quite a bit and
Yeah.
see different instances, because it's interesting that you bring it up in that way because
Yeah, I think it's it's a since it's stricture based on permission, it's restraint. Like it says, it's restraint was enacted by choice of free will. So you could be using magic and whatnot, and not following the law of the major balance.
Yeah, because throughout the whole series, we're being told about how the sorcerers, the Fellowship, in particular, have all this power and they're able to do all these things, but they're always holding themselves back and they're always
Asking
constricted
permission
in
and
some
whatnot.
manner and asking permission, and I think maybe that paragraph just uh, tries to define what that stricture may relate to.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. That's kind of what I got out of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it did feel like an explanation not just of this particular instance, but like of just how the sorcerers work in general. So anyway, yeah, I thought this was interesting.
Yeah.
We talked about Lysair recruiting not at all hypocritically for his own protection.
Mhm.
And then the sword, the chapter where we're told
Yeah.
or not told about Alethiel's origin.
Yeah. That is yeah, we got a little bit of history about Alethiel in that section, right?
Yeah, I think Arathon had this misconception that the blade was made for killing, and Davian sets him straight on that, and that it was never meant to be used to cause bloodshed, and now he feels miserable on behalf of the sword. But like not, I think we see a moment of sadness later on um, when wielding Alethiel against the Iats.
Yeah, that was well. It's cool because Davian kind of points Arathon in that direction,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to look at the sword as more than just what your perception of a sword is. You have to look at it as something, as an instrument that's much more versatile than just the shape that it comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was interesting because then later on in further chapters we see him use it in such a way that even surprises the hell out of Dakar. Like
Yeah.
Dakar was like, "Whoa, what did you do?" And I thought that was pretty cool. So she's yeah, that was set up really nice. How he finds out this information in, of course, of all places, a library, a great library, and and then later on it's put to use in practical in in a a very tense situation, a very action oriented situation, and put to use in such a manner that defies everything we know about swords in fantasy. Basically.
And we also get that the scene where he's in the armory with the sword,
Mm-hmm.
and he uses the scented oils and everything, and wakes it, and it's just like, what the hell?
Was that in a library? With
I think that's after the conversation with Davian, but before he goes to the
right
um,
before he goes to the ship, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Very cool stuff.
They had battled not to kill, but to hold open the gateway to love and awaken the awareness of healing intelligence. I like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I am curious though why they are forged as swords if they were not meant to be used for killing. It Why not a different shaped object? Is it for ease of use or
It's a good question.
I think it sort of ties into like the enchantments, where the enchantment only wakes in defense,
mm-hmm.
and what and they're like very few causes that for wielding a sword would involve defense, but and I don't know. I guess they could have done shields. I don't know. Maybe they just didn't have enough, metal from the fallen star that they were forged out of.
And shields are unwieldy to carry too. I was thinking of a smaller object, but yes. But Miggins apparently knows, and he won't.
No, well, no, that wasn't specifically related to that. My theory is just that it's fantasy. We need a pointy sword, right? A
Yeah.
cool pointy sword. Otherwise, it's not fantasy.
No, that makes sense. Like even as just a what do you call it, subversion of how swords are typically used. I think that's really cool. But from the point of view of the world, I was curious why sword. But
Yeah. Well,
Should be a ring.
you also have
12 rings to rule them all.
Yeah, it's not a ring. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you also have like swords are a symbol of office as well. They're a symbol of there is something to rally around. And if you have I guess you could look at it this way. You could say, well, um, they are a society that uses weapons as a means of defense for whatever city they're in or whatever nation they're in, and so it would be most recognizable to the populace to if that was the symbol of whatever was required to use it for in a general sense, and then so I could see why a sword it might be um, it might be you know attractive to make it a sword as that symbol.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
like
I guess it would
how
be
often do you
less.
get the hold the sword up high and be like, to me,
Yeah, that kind of thing.
rallying.
It's a rallying cry type thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also really interesting how, obviously a sword is most recognizable to us as a weapon of war, and seeing how Arthur is going to use that as a weapon for peace and to avoid war and to avoid violence. Like, he's using this weapon that is quite literally its main purpose really is to be used for violence, as a way to prevent violence. That's something, the subversion that Barsh is talking about. I
Yeah.
think that's a really interesting way that, he's literally using a weapon to avoid using weapons in a way.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I guess they also serve as like they're less likely to be forgotten if they're just random objects. Maybe they won't mean as much. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, are we on to the part? Oh, and then we get to the part where these guys get on the ship, right? Dakar
Yeah.
and Fiona Arit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Bridians take control of Elaine. So that was pretty key too. I thought.
Oh, interesting. What was this?
Does that when she dropped Elaine off with the Bridians, or Elaine just
Oh,
arrived there?
Elaine, sorry. I thought you said take control of the lane, and I was thinking of
Oh no.
the powered lanes. I was like, what magic did I miss?
No, the Lycea's
Mm,
wife.
yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah,
they have her now and under their protection or whatever. And yeah, the Phelan retrieves Dakar and Fion, right? Fion Earth, yeah.
yes.
And
And Talvish and Vandon go with them.
that's right.
Yes.
Yep.
Like that, because it isn't Brandy and like, get this little brat out of my keep. Don't want him here.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Don't blame him.
Oh, he's a brat, all right. And yeah, he's getting on my nerves a little bit less, but we'll talk about that when we get to the battle scene, I guess, against the Iats. Dame. Wait, what? Oh, okay. She's talking to the princess. As I completely missed that it was the Grandma Bridian, who was talking to Elaine in the news items there. I was waiting for her to come back on the page. And
Oh yeah, that's right.
yeah.
Yeah, when she says it's all settled, my dear. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have
Uh,
the conversation between Arathon and Davian.
yeah, the section's titled Sword. And
Yeah, that's the one we just talked about, right?
some
Yeah,
of
we're
it,
in the
like I like that he
next
talked
chapter.
about
Oh, yeah.
where he's like in darkness and strict schooling. He's been ingrained reactions for blindfold sparring since childhood. Like some of what we saw in Peril's Gate. He didn't have. He was uh, a very intense childhood.
Yeah. Yep.
But we also saw that he where was it?
Well, he was constantly being tested by Davian the whole time that he was there. Davian would always test him and tell him he's losing his edge, and tell him he's not doing good enough here, not doing good enough there, and until finally, finally he told him about the ship going to be in trouble. So it was that whole section was a lot of good information about the sword and a lot of information about Arathon's training and his capabilities and postulations about that stuff. And then finally there came at the point where we get to the next chapter where he's going to have to take action.
Yep. So in this section, I got the impression that, well, not I got the impression, but he says there is a line here that that says Arathon is essentially helping Davian. Is it that he wants to do something and he's not able to, so he's asking Arathon to do that for him, and that's how he's helping him? I was curious where the helping bit was, because the way I saw it, Davian's giving him information about something that concerns him and his friends, and really Davian's helping Arathon, so I wasn't sure where the other side of the bargain was.
I'm not sure.
Oh, here. This line where Arathon says, permission to stand guard and act in my behalf, you have it. And then when Davian, I guess, is trying to process that, he says, have we not shared guest oath? If you wished me harm, I would be dead. Your nature is not to beg anyone's help. Therefore, I stand freely offering. So it seems like Davian wants something, and so Arathon is offering said help, but it is in fact concerning Arathon, the help.
I chalked that up to Davian just being up to something still, and we don't know what it is. That's kind of how I felt there.
Okay,
and remember, he has talked about using Arathon as his kind of weapon in the past.
That's right.
So I think perhaps maybe that's sort of related to that, that in a way he's supported. He seems quite supportive of Arathon in his journey, all the way up to Peril's Gate and through that. And it seems like in a way helping himself, help Arathon doing things for himself is helping Davian, because that's part of whatever plan he's got going on as his weapon.
Got it. So this is, I guess, a means to the larger end that Davian is plotting. Yeah. How cool was Arathon's entrance on the boat?
Very cool.
So freaking cool.
It was interesting because the all this is going on, all this stuff, and it's almost a full year since Arathon went into Peril's Gate. So time is passing while he's in there doing all this studying and playing around with Davian, and but then you're right, when he finally gets onto that boat, and that was just like, that was cool. That was just really cool. Really neat.
I like the bit where Phelan meets up with the brothers Ceridian, and she's like, well, and she wants to know about where Arathon is, and they're like, well, you need to ask Takar, and she's like, I would if I knew where he was, and they're like, yeah, he's been entertaining himself with the prostitutes and whatnot. They're like, "We'll take you," and they talked about their guards trying to keep Dakar on a leash, and not a single one had managed to do it for 5 minutes. And then Phelan's like, "And you think you lot could do better?" And she's like, "We're not recruits." And then they just gate crash on Dakar's little hidey hole.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess when Dakar awakens to his mate's sight again on the ship and realizes that Koryani plot is awake, that's when Arathon shows up with, "But yeah, tell me what's up." And then Arathon's like, "Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll tell you what's up." The battle was not battle, but like I guess the defense was pretty harrowing.
Yeah,
It was so tense.
It was very tense.
was-
Yeah, it was, and it lasted throughout this chapter,
Yeah.
chapter
And the
6,
next.
and then chapter 7, and it just kept going on. How he had to constantly, it was almost like he had to constantly change his focus to a different aspect of the assault of the Ayats, and it was just I flew through both of those chapters because it was just so tense. I just kept going and going, and it was just it was very exciting, like one of the more exciting couple of chapters we've read, and and I was surprised at how quickly I went through all these pages in such a short time.
And what was really interesting was because I seem to remember they were trying to keep Arathon awake for a lot of the time, and I was reading this on the plane. I think it was from I was transferring from Toronto to Cancun, and so it was interesting watching flying over parts of Florida and thinking, "Hello, Janny," and then reading this, half falling asleep because I've been up for nearly 24 hours at that point because of travel stuff, and I'm reading about Arathon trying to stay awake whilst I'm fighting to stay awake, reading this thing on the plane. It's quite it was really bizarre reading it, and it's almost happening on the page as well.
Did that amplify your own discomfort?
I think I think it did. It helped that also that I was in a confined space on the plane. It raised the tension, and it's a whole experience reading that. Those 2 chapters, and then I'm just sat there crying on the plane at the end, yeah.
Talk about immersive reading. You were trying to replicate his state of being while you're reading.
I once read a book when I was sick, when the main character was also sick, and he was delirious throughout the book. I was like, I don't want to be reading this right now. So that's why I was curious what reading about Arathon did to your own mental state.
Yeah.
At least there weren't EATs on the plane, because that would have been very bad.
Yeah. One of the more dramatic scenes was when he tells I think it was Fionn that I am not out of options, and you're like, oh, okay, what other tricks is up his sleeve to try to stave off this threat? And what a nasty spell by these Koryani people to put on this ship. I mean, they just keep really, I have no sympathy if they get destroyed completely. I have no sympathy for that order.
So glad their Waystone is semi-destroyed at the moment. Just enough. Stop wreaking havoc with that thing.
Yeah.
with Celadie, it's just how many flipping plots does she have? Arathon keeps defeating her plots, and she kind of goes, "Don't worry, I've got another one." Oh, this is all part of my plan. It's all going well, and it's hang on a minute, you've just had your hand burned, you've had your sigils burst to pieces. Like everything's going wrong, but like she's just seems to have plots coming out of every single place. I don't know.
Plots.
Literally, what is her end plot at this point? There's so many of them, like, and they're all going wrong.
But her resilience is amazing, because every time you think that, all right, she's got to be done. I mean, she was just totally defeated at the end of Grand Conspiracy, and then during Peril's Gate, and you're like, and now she comes up with something else and puts this ward on a ship, and and you're just like, oh, she keeps going. She keeps finding something else to latch onto and make trouble, and in her quest, because she wants to, ultimately she wants to get a hold of Arathon and use him, maybe the same way that Davriel does. Who knows? He wants to use him as a weapon, and maybe she wants to use him as a weapon too, and for her own purposes. But she just seems so much more sinister about it, and
I just want to try and understand her. Like, we understand that they're kind of protecting some sort of human knowledge, that she is trying to work for the purpose of humanity. But like, why does she really care that much? What is it that's driving her? What is it that matters to her so much that she's just willing to pursue this at all costs? Like, I'm really curious. Like, I want to know just exactly what it is, because there must be something that's, she's this focused and this centered her whole life. I guess, thousands of years potentially. However old she is, we don't even know. But like, she spent her entire life working towards this. Why? Why does she care so much? If this is about protecting information from millennia past, but why does that matter so much to her? That's what I want to know. But
well, I'm just wondering if she's losing her marbles after being alive for so long, and and just not being able to see the forest for the trees. Maybe, I don't know, but it. I mean, I think her goal was stated in earlier books that she wanted to have humanity to have control of its own destiny, and not be quite under the Paravian influence that they are.
I just want to know why that matters so personally to her. It feels like it's so intensely personal. This isn't some sort of grand thing for the good of humanity. This is like really, it just feels intensely personal. But
yeah,
we'll see.
I think she thinks it is for the good of humanity, but
there is that prophecy or scrying that she did that told her that if I think if she dies before Arathon does, that the order will die out with her, right? But even that, at why do they need to protect it at this cost? And what is their bargain with the fellowship? Like, can they not take whatever knowledge they have and write it down, and then they don't need a trained prime to keep it a secret, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I have the same questions, Matt. I want to know why she cares about this so very much. I mean, there is some information there with the fact that the order might die out, and she's responsible for keeping the order alive as the current prime, sure. But what does that entail? Like, what is she trying to protect in keeping the order alive? So,
well, I guess the greater question is why would the order die out if she just went by the book and trained up the next
right?
prime
Yeah.
properly?
Doesn't have a candidate.
Well, she was getting one in Lorenda until she.
But yeah, Lorinda would not have survived.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah,
qualified herself basically.
So how would they go about? How would she go about finding a new candidate? um, like, is all this manipulation and all this, um, this, you know, this trying to thwart the fellowship, her means of trying to find a prime to carry on the legacy, or is it in spite of that? Is it,
Well,
you know,
Coriani feud with the Fellowship has existed since Third Age Year 1.
yeah,
And the reasons go back beyond because of it existing since then, go back to before that. Like, I think she touches on it, Moriel touches on it in Fugitive Prince, when humanity arrived and the compact was brokered and whatnot. Guess who didn't get a seat at the table?
that's right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I
Coriani were
remember that coming
denied,
up.
any input into that, and some of this will come up in Storm Fortress, so I'm not going to go any further.
Yeah, okay,
You'll get more info then.
that's good. That's good.
Okay. But I want to speculate with you, Jared, for a moment. There is a yeah. So there, I think one of the last chapters that we read, they had this whole recruitment process where they were looking at these girls and figuring out how much potential they have, and they haven't had anyone up to 9th level potential, right? But
Right.
I none of that has anything to do with Arathon, so I'm very curious about what she saw in that crystal when she cried. Was it in the second book? When she decided Arathon must go. I think her motives with him have changed a little bit now. With I think he's some sort of bargaining chip for for the fellowship to. I think she's gonna hold him hostage against the compact somehow. But I don't think we know the details of that yet, and I don't know if that is still tied to the prophecy that whatever she foresaw.
Right.
So yeah.
What she foresaw when she was doing the scrying to figure out, how to finish polishing Lorinda to, succeed her. She foresaw, she saw Lorinda, what happened to Grand Conspiracy. And then she foresaw her own death, and that, Arathon would be involved somehow. As far as we know, based on what she said in Peril's Gate, at least what she said, I don't know if that's still motivating her, but she, referred to, because she was referring to herself, as a separate person. She said he was a thorn in the path of Moriel's, secession. That issue is now ended. So,
Yeah, she kind of subverted that.
Lady is,
Yeah.
separate from Moriel. Whether she's still worried about it, I don't know. But yeah, she is wanting to, snare him, so she can, try to convince the Fellowship to do whatever.
Yeah, she definitely wants to use him against the Fellowship, and I think Vasha was right earlier in saying that some of her motivations probably have changed over time as we've progressed here.
Yeah. The other thing I was curious about in this regard was it seems that the Fellowship and Dakar are aware that this is why Moriel / Celody wants Arathon, and Dakar was withholding that information from Arathon. I think we saw that in one of the news items. But Davian doesn't seem to know what Celody up to. He only knows that they're trying to capture Fiona Arith, and he says, I don't know what's beyond that. And he's very worried that it's going to be something intense. So is it that he's not aware of the larger plot to use Arathon as a bargaining chip against the compact? Or is it that for just how this particular plot is expected to play out, he doesn't know what the overarching consequences will be?
I think it's the latter. It's just they hadn't, until they pieced it together, realized what exactly she was planning for Even Star beyond the tracking seal. And then they started to arrive, and he realized, oh, he and Aerothin, because I think they're while they're chatting, while traveling or whatever, they both have that simultaneous realization, like, oh wait, no, this is what she's planning. She wouldn't dare, for calling down all the ayats, the yets.
Got it. Cool. And then I guess there's the fight against the Eots. We talked about that a little bit. Yeah, the part with Alethea was really cool. The I guess the other interesting thing there was the dynamic between Phelan, her first mate whose name starts with a T, Dave, is that it?
Yeah,
and
right.
Arathon. So the moment of realization that Phelan has, that she's been sort of choosing Arathon over Dave all this time, and now she needs to stop doing that. Like, I didn't fully understand the dynamics there, but that was interesting, I guess. But do you guys have more insight into that?
What's this guy's name? Where was this Tave?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking up the
T-E-I-V-E.
I'm looking up the
Okay, that's her first mate.
pronunciation. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Tiev.
Tiev. Okay.
That's how it says in the glossary.
Interesting. Tiev. Ooh.
Tiev. Well, he's the father of Phelan's two children.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The mate, the first mate, I guess.
Yeah, first mate. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So, what was the question again?
So, this line basically, I'm curious what that means, or like what Phelan's relationship with Arathon is at this point from her perspective. Two men must share the tremulous wench as she chose for the life that she led, the one that gave her two inquisitive children and the more limited challenge as mistress of a blue water ship. So this is when Arathon sort of starts to lose consciousness, and she grabs hold of him and sends him down, right? And I think she gets this sense that she'll never understand him, that she's fighting for his cause, but just because of the nature of how he is. Like, I think she senses some of his spirit leaking, kind of like Dakar does, because of the intense magic in his being. That's how I interpreted it. And I think following this realization that she'll probably never understand him, I think she chooses for Dave. That's what she says, and I'm not sure what that entails. Is it I guess her kind of, I think in an earlier chapter, Fiak says you're obsessed. So is it that she'll be less obsessed with trying to figure out where Arathon is and trying to maybe protect him at all times? I thought that was an interesting passage.
She's always been pretty obsessed with, because he's always forced her into situations where she wouldn't go off and get in trouble and get in, go work against the Alliance of Light, specifically, without it being secret. And so, in that way, I think he's always kind of, he's always looked out for her as like a father figure, I guess. And I don't know, is that just the split of, like she'll never belong to one person. She's always going to be split in her loyalties and stuff like that.
Mm,
She doesn't seem to take a full um, interest in uh, uh, TV as a equal partner.
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. There was a line somewhere before about how she never married him
Hmm.
because she had too much of her attention taken up by
Yeah,
uh
she's married to a job,
Arathon.
basically.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Um, yeah, this and this bit felt a bit unfair. I think that she says, "Oh man, I'm trying to find the paragraph." Oh yeah. Evan Starr was endangered with all her stout company, and for no better reason than the fact that this one complex spirit had led her first steps past a fisherman's daughter's horizons. Um, is that? I mean, that line felt a bit unfair to me, but is is. But I guess she's saying that this is why she's given Arathon her loyalty all this time, and maybe it's not necessary anymore.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's all Arathon's fault. I mean, come on.
Always, when in doubt, blame
Yeah.
Arathon.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, on the one hand, yeah, he set her on this path, you know, when she was young. But on the other hand, it's probably a path she wanted, and so that's the the contrast, the irony there. Um, so it's very interesting stuff there.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
and then we also start to see Fionn Arith start to change his mind. Uh,
a little bit. He's still
slowly
like really
about
digging his heels in.
yeah,
And-
he is he
I
is
like
like a
the exchange with Fionn Arith and um, uh, Arathon, where Dakar, just looks at him with contempt and is like, "You're a vulture," and then um, goes off, and Arathon's just kind of amused, and he's like, "Yeah, Dakar's just sore because once he behaved like you,"
mhm.
and then Fionn Arith's like, "You get your thrills luring lesser minds to corruption," and Arathon just laughs at him. He's like, your logic is boggling. Because it's like he's been alive a little bit longer than Lazaire, therefore he's corrupt.
Yeah, that was
Yeah, he's just like, yeah, I
interesting.
got no patience for you.
Yeah, there was definitely some interesting dialogue exchanges there between all three of those guys, and but it was it was interesting to see Fionn Arith begin to change his perspective on Arathon based upon the actions that Arathon was taking. And it wasn't just because he was convincing him or you know trying to get him to join the other side or talk him into it or anything like that. It was because of the actions that he was taking and what was happening in the moment. And I like that kind of transition of character is more powerful, I think, I'm than just I talked to him and convinced him. It doesn't ring as true as when you see somebody look at the actions of a character and actually have to change your mind based upon what the character's actions are taking. And I think that's pretty powerful stuff. I really like that.
yeah. And I was thinking about it. We've had over the course of the series a lot of characters sort of change their mind about Arathon, and they went about it different ways. I think Fiona Arith's journey, I think, is most reflective of Dakar's, because Dakar wanted to find fault no matter what. Like everything, he would try to frame it as you're doing evil first before switching over to like failing to find an explanation that would make him look bad. And I think that's kind of where Fiona Arrett's at. Maybe he's a little bit more hard headed about it than Dakar is. But but yeah, I think that's really interesting. Like, it's not just the fact that he's just being a pain and getting in everybody's face and being completely useless sometimes, like Dakar was. It's also this aspect of how he changes his mind about Arathon. It hasn't happened yet, I don't think, right? But I guess we're seeing the process of it.
Yeah, yeah, and I like it doesn't. I like it that it doesn't happen
Yeah,
instantly.
yeah,
That would feel false. It's
yeah,
definitely something that has to. It's hard to change people's minds. It
yeah,
really is, and so it has to happen over a length of a period of time. Yeah.
yeah,
And I liked how, since Pell's Gate and everything Arathon's gone through, he hasn't gone back in his journey. When he's questioned, and Dakar's like, "Oh my goodness, can't you see what you're doing to Theon?" He's like, "Why are you asking this question? You know what it's going to do to him." But actually, Arathon, obviously it takes a toll on him, but not to the extent it did before. He's almost he's wrestled almost quite literally with those emotions and everything that's happened. So he's able to give this answer, and that answer that was what left me in tears. Really, that answer is so brutally honest that it's just like, because I just wasn't, I didn't have enough skill. It wasn't in my power. I just couldn't do it at that stage, and that really kind of stuck with me. That sheer honesty, that openness that he shares with Theon, like I just wasn't good enough, basically. But in a way that doesn't kind of devastate him in the same way that it did before Pell was getting. So we see,
Yeah. Right.
kind of that nuance there, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see, Theon, if he gets the question, the survivors, and gets to understand what really went on.
I like when Dakar finally loses his patience with him. That whole bit. It's like when Dakar's like, His Grace doesn't pander to weakness. Until you stop reasoning with other men's thoughts and start to stand on your own, you won't see. A hollow mind makes you too ready a dupe. You will dance on the puppet strings of his enemies, dumb and blind, for as long as you choose not to think. And then Fion's like, well, you hated him too. And he's like, yeah, and I took an arrow in the back for him. And then he's like, well, now you sound like a fanatic. And he's like, no. And, no, idiot. I'm a seer. And then it's like, yeah, I'm done talking to you. It storms off.
Yeah, and speaking about potential fanatics, we have some change in Sulfin as well, as he goes through quite some stuff, and all he went through to save Lysair from the necromancers previously and earlier in his book, he returns home and he has all these reservations. He's not exactly welcomed with open arms, and I was like, oh, that's a really interesting character development there with Sulfin Evan, and how you're starting to feel a little bit of sympathy for him in spite of all the crap he pulled previously, and look, I like what Matt put up there. Now you begin. But anyways, so him and now what was it? Because Lysaia promised him to tear down Coriani houses stone by stone in chapter 7, and I forget what brought that on. I gotta look that up.
Coriani wanting to have Sulfin's firstborn child.
Did they really?
Yes, basically they were trying to as they refer to it, it's like, oh yeah, Coriani have kids in dark little rooms, hidden away from anybody's eyes that they don't talk about, and wanted to basically whore him out, so they could get a talented child.
Yeah.
Because he has the clan blood magic. Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked when when they're walking to Avenor and Salfanevan sees through his capital S sight, and he realizes that Lysair is all talk, no substance. Like that must have been a breaking revelation for him. Um,
It is.
Before we move on to the Lysair, Salfanevin versus Necromancers, was there anything else that we had to talk about the battle, the Iat battle?
There was one thing.
Let's see, because chapter 8's Avenor.
Because, well, Dakar brought something up, and he brought up he brought up a myth of creation by the desert tribes. It says,
Yep.
on the day Mother Dark chose to couple with Mercy, chaos was born of their union. And I was like, and then Arathon said it was a myth of creation from the desert tribes, but I'm like, what is that referring to? It's got to be referring to something, and I don't know if that's going to be something we find out later as well. But it's
we know that the Bidar, the southern tribes, worship darkness.
They do
in the form of Mother Dark, but
Mother Dark, yeah. There was more of this in the short story that you read as well, Jared.
Yeah, was that okay? That's why it stood out to me, I think, because I read
Yeah.
that and I was like, that sounds really familiar. And
Yeah.
I just yeah, okay, all right. I think
more to come.
Yeah, I think there's more to come there. I just love how she throws all these little hints at us and stuff. It's just like, oh, okay.
And I also like when Dakar notices Arathon. He sees his being like. Do I remember correctly? There is somewhere between an arts adept and a fellowship sorcerer. That's how his physical form looks now. It's sort of leaking the mystery. He has less control over it, but he's sort of almost not entirely just flesh anymore, it seems like. And also, okay, yeah, let's talk about that first. And then Davian bringing Arathon over, that was really cool too. On the eagle, he deformed and then formed again.
Yeah, there's a lot of powerful magic being thrown around here with these guys, and I love how Arathon was using shadow to freeze out the Ayats.
Oh yeah, the climax of that battle, right?
Oh my head, that was just crazy.
That was brilliant, and it wasn't even something that he tried to do, right? He found out, so he could have, in theory, used that all along, and they would have probably been fine. But they only discovered that worked because the ship started to catch on fire, and Arathon used shadow to douse that fire, and that's not all it did. It also brought down all the Iats with it.
Yeah, and he was like, "Whoa! I didn't know that happened. That worked."
Yeah.
But tied to that, before we get to the chapter 8 and the trip to Avenor, we have the bit in chapter 7, the section titled "Reversal."
Oh yes, that was cool. The Waystone now
following after,
is now corrupted. That was fantastic.
Yes, he. If I read it right, he managed to. Oh, the Waystone now has an Ayat inside of it.
Correct.
Yes, and that's
while they shifted around the ballast so that the one side of the boat came up, and someone was able to go down and pry that out.
Right. And they had it ready.
And I love too that he gives them every warning.
Yeah. He's like, I know.
He doesn't outright say it, but he makes his intent clear that he's what he's planning to do, and Lorinda, is unable to really act on it, and Salidi doesn't pick up on it, and then he's like, "Well, ladies, you've had plenty of time to back off."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Drop, mic drop." Except it's a not yet.
Yes. Oh, I didn't get that the Ayat was actually now trapped inside the waystone. I thought it was just some backlash that ruined it. So they could, in theory, get the thing out and it would be fine.
Let's see, how did it?
Oh, not only polluted by an embedded fiend. Okay, yeah, it's an embedded fiend, of course. It's there.
And not just that, but a crack sheared one side of the Great Jewel's matrix, spreading a crackle of crazed marks that threatened to shatter the sphere. And then, not only flawed, not only polluted by an embedded fiend, its clear purple heart was streaked through. Intense heat had feathered a raw strike of citron across the jewel's dark center.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa. That had to be a pretty crazy amount of heat.
Yep.
That waystone's messed up now.
Pretty messed up. They thought it was messed up when it was tuned, like Athena was tuned to not listen to what the waystone wanted to. Oh, okay. Oh, and then the news items had something interesting in this one. Who's the redhead bride?
The laughing
Carrot-head bride, sorry.
Does she come up in chapter 8?
Chapter 7, the news items.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm trying to think.
I don't think so.
No.
No, because I think chapter 8's mostly self-evident.
Yeah, it's the next one,
That's
chapter
something-
9.
Yeah, she
Okay.
comes up, after that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. It's not someone we have met yet, right?
No.
Okay. Cool.
I thought that little those news items. I thought those news items were like, okay, there's a bunch of stuff coming up here.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess. Yeah, we'll talk about it when we get to this section. But the original cabal that met up when Talith was imprisoned, those seem to be all corrupted by necromancers. And it's unclear whether they were taken over by the necromancers or if they colluded with them, and like the ordering of events there with the necromancers. Did they collude and allow the infiltration, or if that just happened as the highest authorities in Lyser's land?
Well, we saw where Cerebeld was corrupted, but I think that because we saw that in the last 4 bits, and I think prior to that, and we'd have to ask Janny to be sure, but I think prior to that, they weren't insinuated into the High Council, but kind of working through, through Cat's Paws and whatnot. But once with the 7 occupied and whatnot, they got bold, and now they've subverted his priesthood.
Oh, okay. So this hasn't been a thing since the beginning?
I don't believe so, because we know when Lysair was snared, and we know when Cerebeld was snared, and I think they were making them use, but I don't think they were initially since they weren't always corrupted, but not that you could really tell the difference. But what the stuff they were doing was serve the necromancer's purpose, but the necromancers weren't initially doing things with them. So
I was wondering about that because it seemed like some of these guys um, were just as much victims as anything else. As they were, because they were in league. I don't know. Some of the people they arrested and put into prison. I didn't know if they were just going along with Cerebeld and the rest of the council, and then the necromancer used them, to hop from body to body or what have you.
When he takes them in Avenor, yeah, he says the entire council, everybody,
Right,
was corrupted by the necromancers.
and that's because Stolfin could see that they were corrupted,
With the lane surge, and he was
Right.
attuned with Sephir, and he could see all that.
Right. But did they have any actual power themselves, or were they just their bodies just pawns for the necromancer to be able to use?
They were just slaves to whoever the necromancer.
And that kind of brings me about my whole thing with chapter 8 is like it was just interesting to see how Lysaea, his bullheaded sense of justice is kind of like the very thing that could bring him down in this case during that whole battle. And because technically he's right that the people should be they should have the right to have at least a semblance of justice at a trial and be convicted in that manner. But of course it's not that simple because Sullivan knows that any delay in getting rid of this necromantic corrupted council is going to lead to trouble. And so it was just interesting seeing that irony being played out in real time. And it's just and of course it was just action packed, that whole thing when he's trying to fight off the necromancers and stuff like that, and it's really cool stuff.
Yeah, and it's like Lysa's sense of justice shows up at all the wrong moments to help him, right? Like, he was quite happy to enslave a bunch of people and, I don't know, burn a bunch of people without trial, I guess. I don't know. Did he give the people suspected of magic trials? Or were they just burnt at the stake without any trials? But these guys will get a full trial because under my rule, nobody dies without a trial. Okay, sir. Sorry, go ahead.
But what a heightened sense of danger that whole thing.
That staircase sequence. Oh my goodness. And the door and his Lysaea's coming through.
And the bit where, it's like he'd killed a bunch of them, and then the corpse at his feet starts talking and gets up.
I know. I was like, oh, jeez.
This book is really scary. These necromancers, they are not messing about. Like, oh boy. They are freaky.
And it has a sense of danger from like zombie movies, right? The more people die, the more people turn against you, and the stronger the enemy gets.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he finally gives in and burns the place down because he remembers Talit.
Yeah.
But
yeah, once again, kind of an emotional loss of control there, and that's what it takes, though, to get him to get out of there.
And he suspects Sulfanevand of how do I know you're not working against me? You killed all these men. Maybe you're corrupted.
Yeah,
and that's
you kill your own guys.
But that's logical.
Listen to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that whole bit's literally himself and just screaming and like wanting to shake him. He's like, "Listen to me! Do you understand the words coming out of my mouth?"
This is it, this sense of paranoia, and you can imagine as well, if like say ever kind of comes to cognizance about the mischief and the curse, imagine, him, how that's messing with his mind, how that's going to affect him. Obviously with the necromancers now he's questioning, well, who can I trust in my circle, even Solfin? Well, then that leads me to question what's going to happen when he figures out about the curse. Hopefully, maybe eventually, how's that going to mess with his brain? If he realizes that there's something almost like affecting every decision he makes. And we see that a little bit here. I'm curious to see how that plays out down the line.
Yeah, it's just so convoluted because you have both Arathon and Lysaea, they both are fighting against the Coriani in one way or another. They both, I mean, Arathon hasn't fought directly against the necromancers, but he he's definitely would be opposed to them, and so is Lysaea fighting directly against them, and so. But then, of course, they're going to be fighting against each other whenever they get close to each other. So it's such a mix of stuff.
Yeah, and you start to think, well, who's really the villain here? We've got the Coriathane, who you're like, oh my goodness, Celadie is, she's completely off on one and on her own agenda. And then you have the necromancers, a different group with their own agenda. And then, of course, you have the curse. You have the incoming wraiths that they're trying to deal with. You have whatever's going on at Methyl. You have all these different things, and it's kind of like, which direction do I look? What am I supposed to be worried about the most? What's the real enemy here? Could it even be the sorcerers themselves? We don't know, but really at this stage. But
And of course, the moment one of them mentions Arathon, he's like, yeah, they know about Arathon, so they must be working with him. Find me my wife and child, and I will prove it to you.
Yeah.
Oh man. But Lysair finds out that Kivor is alive. I wonder where that will go. And Elaine was told. Oh, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but I think someone told someone else that Kivor is alive, but not to tell Elaine that, because at this point her son is all practically as lost to her as if he was dead. But the motivation for him coming back was he didn't want his mother to hurt for his death. So it feels a bit misguided at this point to keep that information from her that he's alive. But yeah, I'm curious about how that will play out if and when she finds out.
Yes, I am. Me too. Yeah.
Cool.
Matt's not saying anything, so.
poker face.
Matt knows.
Do I?
Do you? Anything else that we should talk about? Any other secrets the Magic 8 Ball can reveal that aren't unclear?
I just love this line. I just wanted to read it at the end here with the little chapter excerpts at the end, and just how dark it really is. So this is, in the dark of the moon, cowled figures crouch over a fire, savoring the flesh of a slaughtered page. And I'm just like, oh my goodness.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's
You forget
terrible.
how dark some of this stuff really is. You're like, oh, this is entertaining. I want to see more of these necromancers. Oh, wait, these are really scary necromancers.
And they're terrifying. I think there was a line here somewhere about the planet itself was hiding from these powers or something to that effect. I'm totally making that up, but there was something here about the planet and the necromancers. Oh yes. The core harmony sustained by Athera herself shrank before the wounding blight of cult practice that ensnared the living, then parasitically fed damn it, on trapped agony to crystallize flesh into an unnatural state of longevity. That's scary. The core harmony shrank before the wounding blight. The fellowship sorceress can solve everything, right? But no, apparently this is something that they are also terrified of, which, yeah.
What was it that Sundir, told Sulfan Evand? Sethvir has a scar as long as your arm.
Jeez.
Interesting.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yes. Cool. Lots to look forward to. We are going to be reading the next 3 chapters for the next discussion. If there's nothing else, let's do outros. Matt, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'm also known as Miggins. You can find me over at Hobbit Books on Twitter or X, and also lurking on the page sharing forums.
Jared.
And I'm Jared. I'm at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and I'm on a page chewing forums and also a part of podcast on there, including speculative speculations. With
I am still Chibi Po, and like I said, it can be found on page chewing and on Twitter and so forth.
And you can find me on the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain and on the podcast Speculative Speculations with Jared and a bunch of other wonderful people. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if you'd like to join us for these discussions, consider checking out the Patreon forum, which is where we do all the planning. We meet once every 2 weeks. And read about 150 pages. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.